Tell you what, if you're in Sydney, there is a very good chance that you may well have been part of what was quite the protest today over the Sydney Harbour Bridge. You've heard plenty talk about it. Tonight, I want to give you a slightly different angle on it, which was, how did this happen at all? Premier said no. Police said no. What exactly was the ruling the court made? What does this mean for the future? If the course is good enough, you can do what you want. We'll get to it all a little later. That said, can I also just I hate to, don't want to be the one to rain on anyone's parade here, metaphorically or otherwise, but I noticed some people on social media saying 300,000 people were there today. That's not true. All right, a lot of people. You can't go from end to end and hour to hour without it being a lot of people. Police say it's something like 90,000, activists 300,000, truth somewhere in the middle. And what did they want? Well, this. And when do they want it? Yesterday.
We want the harshest sanctions on Israel.
We don't want to see rhetoric anymore. We want to see action.
Definitely sanctions. Definitely, stopping any export of parts that will go to F-35s, for example.
Liberate our land, take our land back. We want our land back.
Now, this may hurt some, but it's the truth that I feel about millions of people, which is that when we understand the devastation of what's been happening over the past few years, there's that part of us that does say other side of the world. Well, the reality is that the events of what has happened on the other side of the world are brought forward to us each and every night. In terms of why those people decided to march as they did today, well, the shots that can't be really downplayed, which is the level of destruction that has happened because Hamas has not given up in Gaza. The question, of course, is Israel doing it for the right reason? Have they gone too far? Again, a debate that I'm not going to try to solve like any of the Middle East conflict tonight. But something that is interesting is that I remember saying months ago that if Israel kept going the way that they were going, one of the ways that the world was going to respond was going to deliver what the current Israeli government does not want, and that is a formal recognition of Palestine as a country. Now, the chance for that to happen happens in September at the United Nations. Now, Palestine already has an office, a desk, and is part of the United Nations, but is only there essentially as an observer, not as a participatory nation. But as you know, countries like Canada, countries like the United Kingdom, and most likely Australia is going to end up recognising Palestine as a country. Now, Palestine, of course, is not just Gaza, but is also the West Bank. There is no bridge that links the two of them, and to access either of them means you need to go through Israeli territory. That's what is going to make the recognition of Palestine complicated. Now, once you become a country, yes, you have a right to form your own form of military defence, but you also have the right to build your own airports, to control your own airspace. And in part, that now looks like almost an inevitability, regardless of whether you want it or not. And the problem in this conversation for those of us who want to not necessarily find something in the middle, but see this from the relative peace of Australia, is that we look at this in multiple angles. We look at this in multiple ways about what's justified, what's not justified, what's too much, what's not enough. And as I have said, the process we're talking about tonight is not just the protest itself. You will see much conversation, and rightly so, about that in the next few days. But I want to get back to the central idea, which is if the elected premier of your state says that an event should not happen, should it happen or not happen? When the police say the event should not happen, should it happen? But of course, we have independent branches of our system, which means the courts end up having, in this case, the final say. The decision that was made by the justice is worth having a look at. But remember, if I had told you 10 years ago that if the premier of a state and the police of that state said no to the event, regardless of what the event was, no matter how ill-timed or well-intentioned it may be, if the premier and the police said this 10 years ago, did you think there was any chance of this happening?
We have told the organisers that we don't support their march route. They are well aware of that.
Police are prepared to sit down and have been for the last week on an alternative route.
So, as you know, this went through the courts. There was a hearing which happened late in the week. Decision was not handed over until the day before the protest, which brings me to the exact reason. And you may well not have heard the exact reasoning that came from the judge. Justice Belinda Rigg on Saturday refused the New South Wales Police Commissioner's application for a prohibition order, saying that the person in charge of, or one of the organisers of the Palestine Action Group, had compellingly explained the reasons why he believes there is an urgency for response to the humanitarian situation in Gaza. The public interest in freedom of expression at this time, in the manner contemplated for the reasons advanced, is very high. However, the public interest is not being disrupted or having safety risks to the extent identified in the evidence before me, which is also very high. So, the police had a point, the protesters had a better point. But this brings us to, again, the systems of checks and balances. Now, on one level, the systems worked. Why? Because somebody adjudicated. Somebody who's not a politician, not a police officer, not a protester, was the one deciding whether this protest took place or not. But of course, we know that if they don't like the cause of the protest, the court most likely would have said no. Which means we're not having discussions about the right to protest and freedom of access to things like the Sydney Harbour Bridge. We're talking about causes that are acceptable or not acceptable. Now, you can't sit here on a Sunday night and be in complete denial about the reality that there was an awful lot of people who decided to take that march today. We have not seen signs or heard things that are said on the fringes that are particularly objectionable, but all that may come out when the internet sleuths do their works over the next few days. But obviously this was, yes, a popular cause, asterisk to what you declare popular, but I'd imagine if you can fill the Sydney Harbour Bridge for a few hours, it is considered to be a popular cause. Does that mean it's the right cause? Of course not. Does it mean it should be immediately followed with actions from our government? No. But spare thought for the police today, because the police had to respond to a situation that, remember, they said no to, that they did not want to happen. And this was how many police were required to try to control a crowd of this size and passion.
We had over 1,000 police in the field today, 1,000 police that had to give up their Sunday, come into work, and I want to thank them for their professionalism. I wouldn't like to try and do this every Sunday at that short notice. There's a reason we need time to plan these things out, and I think going forward into the future, that has to be taken into consideration.
And here's the bit where what few friends I may have left after having the opinion of which I do at this moment, I'm about to lose them too. Again, this protest is one that clearly a lot of people wanted to be involved with. That does not mean it's an endorsement from me about the protest. I do think that it is odd that the court doesn't give its deference to the elected leaders or the police. But what about this question of 1,000 police officers who were not being planned to be involved in anything this weekend, that clearly were taken off other duties or maybe didn't have a weekend? You see, New South Wales has an interesting system, one that can be used against people when the police don't like the cause of which they have been called out to deal with. Remember when Nigel Farage was out here in Australia? He was holding a ticketed event at a convention centre, but because people turned up to protest the ticketed event, there were dozens of police officers that were required to deal with the situation. The people who were running the Nigel Farage event were sent a bill for the police. In Victoria, the provocateur, Milo Yiannopoulos, was again doing the same thing. This is when he was holding a ticketed event inside a private function area, but because protesters turned up, extra police were required. A bill was sent to the organisers of the ticketed event for how people responded to their ticketed event. Now, normally these groups don't claim that they have any sort of leadership, but clearly somebody was willing to be its leader when it came to presenting themselves before the court. The organisation was willing to present itself before the court as the organisation that was organising the protest. Will anyone send them a bill? If they don't send them a bill, then again, just like the protest taking place at all, we don't have a system of hard lines that cannot be crossed because the police or the Premier say you shouldn't do something. Instead, because your cause is a righteous one, regardless of what the cause is, not only do you get to do the process, but you will not even be sent a bill. Maybe not for all 1,000, maybe for 100 of the police officers that needed to be called off duty. And again, if they are sent a bill, watch the outrage happen. The outrage that wasn't there when the bill was sent to Nigel Farage and other people who, the left of this country, do not like when they turn up as international visitors. Then there's, of course, the issues that are even bigger than what has taken place in Australia this weekend. And yes, that image will go around the world because it's the same location where the celebration of a brand new year goes around the world. And no doubt what is going to be similar sites in lots of different locations around the world. The Sydney Harbour Bridge will now be included in what is going to be a significant day of those who want something to change, not just in Gaza, but something to change in Israel as well. But there's something even bigger than all of these protests. Again, as a situation when, regardless of, and I know there's been a lot of conversations about whether this photo proves something or doesn't prove something, where this story is or isn't made up, where this story is or isn't misinformation coming from Hamas. It's the issue of the devastation that is in Gaza. Again, it just can't be ignored. Now, again, the difficulty for the world looking at this situation is that Gaza is the elected government. They had one election a long time ago. They also are the terrorist force that was responsible for October the 7th. Israel has responded by trying to go after Hamas, go after Hamas by basically hitting many, if not most regions in and around Gaza. 2 million people live there. There's no way in, there's no way out. So essentially 2 million people either are moved to the very edge of this little spit of land and now starting to move back, or many of which have been killed. You know this. Well, the bigger bit of news of the past couple of days is that all of the nations around what could well become Palestine as a country are now starting to say Hamas needs to go. We're talking about Arab and Islamic states that are now turning around and saying if Palestine is to stand alone as its own country, it has to get rid of Hamas. Hamas, which is a long overdue for an election government, or at the very least, the terrorist organisation that is in control of that particular territory. Interestingly, Hamas, when talking here, says that they won't lay down their guns until that a Palestinian state is established. So does this mean that in September, if countries like Australia recognise Palestine, then Hamas disappears? Probably not. And amazingly, at a time when popular opinion seems to have gone in a certain direction, so much so that you could cover the Sydney Harbour Bridge hour after hour after hour, along with protests around the world, we are reminded about the giant asterisk that is in and around the good guy, bad guy way of viewing the world. The images and the video you have seen, I will not show it here because it is part of their campaign of human degradation. It's a man who clearly has been starved within almost an inch of his life, digging inside a tunnel, which may well end up being his grave. That is the image of the people who we will either recognise because they are the government, or do we create a scenario where the recognition only comes when they are no longer the government? This in some way, if not totally, is the conversation that needs to be had. But as always, an Australian, not trying to find the Goldilocks moment because these are deep, complicated and bloody struggles. Ones where I know people become deeply upset if you are not totally in support of their worldview in either direction. But on the behalf of what I believe still is the majority of Australians who want peace all over the world, who don't want foreign conflicts to become potential difficulties in this country. Let's see if Penny Wong tomorrow, when asked about the recognition of the country, links it to who governs it the day before, not the promise of what may happen the day after. We'll all watch, we'll all wait, and no doubt those of us who talk about it every now and then will disappoint many. But I just see it as something that, yes, we could be distracted by the photo of the day, the image of the day, the outrage of the day, but clearly there is only one way that this thing is going to turn. And all of it, again, is about whether Hamas is in charge of the territory or not. More in a sec on that, and a whole lot more. We'll debate that very shortly.